I think in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to play with antique cars, and I never was in a position before in my life educating kids and getting them through college and whatnot to be able to do that. And one day about 10 years ago, I realized that, now I can afford to do that and time-wise, and I bought a Model T to start with, and then the rest is history. I am a mechanical engineer by training, and I'm mechanical, but I'm not I wasn't a particular car guy at the time. I was visiting with someone nearby, and he was showing me a collection that he was in the process of taking care of, and this car was sitting there. And it was an electric car, but I didn't know what it was because it was different looking than the ones that I had seen. So I ended up making the owner an offer, and this was like last October, and I never heard back. And I thought, well, I must have insulted him with my offer, but I didn't put a whole lot of value in the car because it was in tough condition, no batteries, everything had been rusted through and whatnot. And then a week or so before Christmas, they called up and they made a counteroffer, which I accepted, and we drove up and we literally dragged it onto the trailer with flat tires and all. And in the meantime, I had done research on it, and it turns out it originally was a 1919 Detroit Electric, and what they were doing in the very last few years of production, a company called Dunk, which had acquired the assets of Detroit Electric, was buying used Detroit Electrics off the market, modernizing them and reselling them, and this is one of those cars. They lowered the roof about 6 to 8 inches, they put balloon tires on it, they put bumpers on it, they modernized it so it would fit into the more contemporary garages of the day. Turns out they only made 3 of them in 1931. It's what's called a heavy chassis All A version, and one of them has disappeared and the other one is in a museum in Peoria, Illinois. So this is the only one that's out in the public and being shown. So it turns out to be a very unique car. Getting my wife Linda involved in the hobby is kind of a funny story and important. When I first started to get hooked, her shtick, it turned out, she's into vintage fashions, and there's size differences then to today, and so she's had patterns made to her size that can make vintage clothes. So she basically has at least one outfit that goes with each one of our cars. So she's got outfits, and so do I. And we dress up when we go to shows. It's like, if we're gonna do this, we're gonna dress up. And not many people, at least on the East Coast, do that. But it's fun, and people appreciate it when they go to shows.
The owner of the vehicle, Bill Lilly, was interested in having a car done. He got invited to the concours in Greenwich, and that it would be 3 months. You kind of take a deep breath and you say, can't be done, it's impossible. And then you're like, well, let me see the car. And you start thinking, and as a business, it's quite a challenge. It's a challenge to restore any car, let alone when somebody says, I need it tomorrow. Because in the restoration business, 3 months is tomorrow. When you consider a normal restoration takes a year to 2 years. But I could not say that, absolutely, Bill, this thing will be done, there'll be a ribbon on it, and don't worry about it. It was always, I'll give it my best, I won't give up, and I think we have a shot.
Once I talked with Rich, the owner, I think none of us knew what we were completely getting into, and none of us could be sure what the budget was going to end up to be. But I also felt like Rich was very forthcoming and honest, and we would, kind of go down this road together.
And you came in, and I want probably a little not warm and fuzzy, very businesslike. I want the car done, and so okay, I'll do my best. And then said I got to do some work on it. Well, I never let people work on their car. I mean, there's liability. There's I'm the one working on it. I don't want the owner in the way. And so I was a little apprehensive, but it was like, you know what? He's involved with the car. Seems like a decent guy. And you're a pure car guy at heart, regardless of the vehicle, regardless of the price. You like certain vehicles, and that's it. And so I think that the relationship with the staff, with me, was one of the key factors of being able to pull it off, and it to be an enjoyable experience for both of us.
I liked what I saw in the facility. I had at other places that were, much further away, and I just didn't have the confidence because I didn't know anyone that had worked with them before. So I'm happy to come here.
Again, a lot of key things had to happen for a 3-month turnaround to a prize-winning car.
I wanted the car, but I wanted to be able to show the car. And the paint outside was shot, but acceptable. I mean, some of it was flaking off, but you could show it as a preservation type car. But the inside upholstery was completely unusable. I mean, the mice and the moths had gotten to it, and the padding was out, and it just was horrible.
I wanted to do, when it first came in and you talked about it, and Greenwich, I was like, well, we got to take the body off. There's no way we're going to get this thing to look perfect without taking the body off. And then once we started looking at it, and we started looking at the curved windows, and we started looking at how it was underneath there and the time frame, we were like, we can't take this body off because we're never going to get close. It's going to blow the hell out of any kind of budget or reasonable cost. And so we kind of did half and half, where I think we removed the rear end a little bit and removed the front a little bit and got underneath there, and we were able to get it to look like a frame off without taking the body, because it was just, it would have been ridiculous price-wise and time-wise, and we wouldn't have had a whole lot to show for it.
It took probably till the late 40s to really have curved glass become standard. And yet at the Detroit Electric, the style is so beautiful because of the curved glass. You can really see out of the car. And it was a very difficult thing to do, to bend the glass.
It was like we couldn't remove the glass, because if we did, we would virtually have to disassemble the car. If it broke, which is almost guaranteed, because a lot of times they're in little brads and stuff, so we had to restore the car, leaving the windows in.
Most people, when they look at the car, see the metal, but it is actually a wooden car with metal just tacked along the outside. There was no welding, no structural component of the metal. It was all wood, the door frames, the frame of the car, the structure, the roof, everything you see, and especially the covers for the batteries. Those swooping things were all wood with just very simple curves, because they didn't have hydraulic presses that could punch out the metal. It's just thin, and you look at it, it's just really upholstery tacks that hold it on. With the Detroit Electric, you were sitting in a wooden box that was insulated and was cooler, didn't transfer the heat, lighter, and had give and flex for the poor quality of cobblestone roads.
They're cool mechanically, they're cool electrically, they're certainly easy to drive, and it's fun to be able to teach people the history of them, and because people don't know that a third of the cars on the road back in 1900 were electric. They just have no awareness of that.
I love the learning aspect of it. I'm not afraid of anything when it comes to mechanical automotive. All the bright work that we took off the car had to be sent out to be replated. And we had to determine if some of it was chrome, some of it was only nickel. When it comes back and you unwrap everything, it's definitely like Christmas Day, looking at how bad they were compared to how good they look now. The hubcaps were a major challenge because they were cast aluminum, very pitted with some oxidation, but the center logo from the manufacturer had to be saved because it's irreplaceable. So that took a lot of finesse.
One of my other concerns was stripping those damn wheels. Kevin came up with a way. I think he wound up putting it in the cabinet blaster, and the wheels were, because those wooden wheels, to strip them and all that can be a huge amount of time. And one of my guys wound up coming up with a way, and it was like stripping, it was nothing. It wound up being not an issue.
The pinstriper was fantastic. Never met him before. We went downstairs with him. We had your wheels all laid out. And we were just talking to him about what we think we're looking for, and showed him the photographs that we took of the pinstriping before we painted them. And he just took a look at the photo. He dips his brush in the paint. Freehand just lays out a stripe on that wheel, and the whole room just went silent. This guy was spot on. Blew us away. He did a great job on that and the car. Everything came out nice. Your upholstery has to go, has to be behind that plate.
For the most part, nobody knows anything about these cars, and trying to find that information and how they did this and how can we do this, and especially when Jim got into some of the wiring, through the, you're talking about a car that's been around for 100 years.
I couldn't trace any wires. They were all the same old cloth colored color, like an off-white. You couldn't trace anything. So that was the first clue that we had to go through the car. We wanted to make anything right.
We didn't have the plastics and the rubbers that we have now then. Insulating wire was not done by rubber, because the rubber would just, the heat going through it would just melt it. Now, the wires that we normally use are the old-fashioned loom braided wires. They are modern wires with, insulation, plastic, rubber insulation, but over them is a loomed covering woven in, made to duplicate the original.
We had other wiring diagrams that we had printed out, and Bill had brought in a few, and we never had two that were the same. There always seemed to be differences and questions, and which one should we use, which one is right, which one is wrong, not really wrong, but not for the car. We figured it out.
Once we found out that it was as unique as it was, it's like one thing led to another, and it's like, okay, let's go for it.
This car had to make it to the Greenwich Concours show. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It had to go. We pretty much knew that we were going to stay that night until everything was finished, which we did, within reason. There were a few things that weren't finished on the car, but wouldn't stop it from going to the show. So all the mechanicals had to be done. The car to roll, run, be able to put itself on the trailer and make it to the show.
For that night, we needed to have a clear-cut picture of what we were doing, how we were doing it, and what our goals were. Because there were certain things we couldn't do. We couldn't get every taillight and headlight working, but we had to have the vehicle moving and driving.
One of my bigger concerns was we have multiple talents in reference to mechanical. We have multiple talents in reference to bodywork. What we don't have multiple talents is in reference to doing the upholstery. The upholstery is a one-man band, which we have a Mondo. We had another young kid that was in here who weighed about 75 pounds, and he was able to maneuver and get in there, and he sped Mondo a lot because he was able to prep all these areas, clean out, put in. Even though we had one Mondo, we wound up having 1.5 Mondos in order to get that upholstery done, because the young kid Tyler was fearless and going in. He'd say, "Do this, take this, okay, put this in," and he was a huge help in helping Armando. We were somewhere during the time, which I think is on camera somewhere, when you were like, "Oh, I'm going to tell him I can't go." And we were side by side, and I looked at you. Hopefully you didn't pick up on my body language. I wanted to strangle it. It's like, what do you mean you're going to tell them you can't go? We've been working our ass off. Guys are here at night, and don't give up yet. I mean, don't count me out. We're close. We're close.
This is what
under the gun looks like,
Hey.
and stress.
Are we gonna
hopeless.
make it?
Well, he doesn't think so, which I understand. But I'm not willing to give up the ship just yet. When it comes to this fine upholstery, there's only one individual, and that was always our concern. But we're just hoping he's working late tonight. And I'm not giving up. Jim was extraordinary on not being intimidated and saying, "I'll do this." Basic thing was just leave me alone. Is I need to be in there. Because a lot of times we had multiple individuals working on it. You know, and Armando wants to get in there on the other side to do a door panel, and Jim's in there upside down with his feet hanging out the window, and we need 3 other guys. So that was the only thing that Jim was like, I can do it, but I need to be left alone.
Yeah, we were on top of each other working. There was 3 or 4 of us at the same time, which is a little bit tough, from interior to mechanicals to lighting, getting this car back together.
Well, that night I had an engagement. And the guys were here, and I had my phone in front of me, and I was watching, the whole time. You guys, and I remember dropping the car and you backing it out, and so it was kind of amazing, really. Most people would never, if you told them, the place did it in 3 months, they probably thought you were lying.
We were under the gun, and we had to get it done. We had to go to the show the next day, which meant the procedures had to be right, because we were all working overtime. We all had other things that we had to do, but we had to concentrate. And that's a key point in teamwork.
We kind of pulled it off. I think within 90%, we pulled it off that you were able to go on the show car.
Straight, okay? Yep.
We've had the car at the Greenwich Concourse, which was quite the challenge to get it running. We were here till like 9:30 the night before, putting the wheels on. And we got it on the trailer and got it on the show field the next day. And not all the speeds were working, but it drove.
Turn the wheel all the way up.
Hung up signs inside where the upholstery wasn't finished yet, and that the restoration was in progress. And it was an interesting reaction because we had only had it in restoration like 3.5 months. And people that knew what it took to restore a car couldn't believe that that was true, and I had the picture book to show them. And then the people that didn't know anything about restored cars were fascinated by looking at the unupholstered sides of the car, and it was a wood car, and so it was really kind of a big hit, even though it wasn't, wasn't being judged to concourse standards at the time. It was quite good.
You kind of put your heart and soul into these, and everybody did on the staff, and to get the recognition is really great. And then to see a text, Rich, I won this, Rich, we won here. A car like yours can be overshadowed because doesn't have the glitz. It doesn't have all that, and to see that people can recognize and still pick your car out, and the judges still say, this is best of show, second of show, whatever you had won, is even on top of it,
I would love to be able to go back in time to just stand there and watch what they had to go through back then.
People have no idea that in the early beginnings that the electric car it was a question whether it was going to be steam, gas, or electric, and to see people's reaction and not realizing that the electric car was as prominent and advanced as it was in its day. Everything went well. Everything went well in order to pull the 3-month deal.
As I mentioned to you before, I think we have a world-class car here. I don't think there's anything else that's close.